Hey guys, today we'll be taking a look at the latest polling that's been released for the 2024 elections. We are now just 1 year away from the next general election, which will be held on November 5th of 2024. Both of the primaries are now in full swing. We're going to see the first races on both sides, but obviously the Republican nomination is going to be a lot more interesting to watch, despite Trump having a pretty big lead. As of right now, his lead is only expanding, while Ron DeSantis has taken a sharp fall from where he was just a few months ago. But there is some big changes at the bottom here, with Nikki Haley cementing herself now as the third place candidate, with Vivek Ramaswamy falling after his two debate performances. We also have new polling averages in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina for the Republican primary, and these are going to be the three most important states in determining who the next Republican nominee is going to be. We also have numbers on the Democratic side, as well as lots of betting odds. As of right now, the betting markets show Donald Trump with a 72% chance at winning the Republican nomination. So we're going to take a deeper dive into all of this data. We're also going to look at the Senate elections. This is a map that Democrats should not be able to win. I mean, look at all of the seats I have not filled in. Only Texas is currently held by a Republican. Democrats are defending seats in Ohio, West Virginia, and Montana. It will be a very difficult task, but new polls right now are showing that despite it being almost impossible, Democrats have still somehow a very good chance at maintaining control of the upper chamber of Congress and, of course, winning the presidency for a second time. And with the House in the situation that it is right now, in terms of the Republicans barely able to elect a speaker after weeks without one, Democrats are probably going to win the House as well. So today we'll be taking a look at the latest polling for 2024 and what the numbers are currently telling us about the balance of power after the next general election. So starting off with the latest polling for the Republican nomination nationally, as of right now, Donald Trump is at 59%. He started the process with 49% support from his own party, and as of this point in time, there really is no viable option, no viable challenger that could defeat Trump in the nomination process. Ron DeSantis, for a long time, especially at the beginning of the year, was thought to be the one that could actually win the Republican nomination besides Donald Trump. But as time has gone on, he has not proven himself to be a strong campaigner. His debate performances have also been pretty lackluster, and without Trump at the debates, it's essentially as if all the other candidates are fighting for second place. Now, recently, we have seen a pretty sharp rise for Nikki Haley's numbers, especially since that second debate where she performed very well. She's currently polling at 8.3%, while Vivek Ramaswamy, who peaked at 7.5%, even 8.1% right before that first Republican debate, he fell soon after and is now in a pretty distant fourth place. Mike Pence has also recently dropped out of the race, and we're going to see a lot of these other candidates starting to drop off, especially Chris Christie, Asa Hutchinson, Doug Burgum, and Tim Scott. I think in the end, we will have Trump, DeSantis, Nikki Haley, and maybe Ramaswamy if he wants to continue his campaign. But as of this point in time, I think the only three candidates that even have a sliver of a chance at winning the nomination are Trump, DeSantis, and of course Nikki Haley. Now, this is the average on 538. It's slightly different, with Trump at 57. However, DeSantis is at a pretty similar 13.9, and Nikki Haley at 7.9, and 538 is a little bit more favorable to Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, looking at the individual primary polls from the three most important primary races, Iowa is, of course, by far the most important. On the Democratic side, Iowa is a better predictor of who would end up winning. That is surprising considering that Iowa has a more Republican makeup in terms of demographics. But on the Republican side, Iowa is not always the best predictor of who will end up winning the primary overall. As we saw in 2016, Donald Trump did not come out on top in Iowa. It was instead Ted Cruz. But as of right now, Trump maintains a very solid lead. This is a huge lead in a state like Iowa. If Trump can win 50%, or if any other candidate in the past could win 50% in Iowa, they're almost guaranteed to win the nomination. Now, Ron DeSantis is actually doing surprisingly well. He's up there at 17%. He's going to win delegates. Nikki Haley might win some delegates. However, in a caucus like the one that we have in Iowa, you do need to meet that 15% threshold if you want to win any delegates from each precinct at all. Tim Scott is in 4th place. This is one of the best regions that Scott is performing, and he is betting on Iowa as one of the states that's going to help him continue to have momentum and be able to allow him to continue being in this race, without looking like there's really no point for him to be there. In New Hampshire, we have a pretty similar story, although Donald Trump does do slightly worse in New Hampshire, where voters are a lot more moderate. However, he is still up there at 45.3%. Nikki Haley is at 15%, and I think that Nikki Haley, if she can perform well in both Iowa and New Hampshire, there is a point to be made that she could be the Trump alternative, especially considering that South Carolina is going to be the 3rd primary, the state where Nikki Haley was a very popular governor of. We have Ron DeSantis in 3rd place at 10.9 and Chris Christie at 9.0. So New Hampshire, of course, being more moderate, Chris Christie does a lot better in the Granite State, and so I think Chris Christie right now is just betting on a strong performance in New Hampshire, but considering the next state is South Carolina, a state that he polls at 2.1% in, I think even a strong performance in New Hampshire is not going to be able to save Chris Christie, and of course Vivek Ramaswamy polling at 2.1% is just abysmal. Tim Scott is one of the senators from South Carolina alongside Lindsey Graham, but he's only polling at 6.5%. If he drops out, he could help Nikki Haley a lot. Nikki Haley is doing very well in the state. She is essentially peaking in terms of where she's at right now, 20.8%. South Carolina, I think, is the pathway for Nikki Haley. It was the state that gave Joe Biden the momentum to win the 2020 Democratic primary, and it could do something similar for Nikki Haley in 2024. Now, moving on to the Democratic nomination, we have Biden at 62%. That is essentially an unbeatable lead. And of course, when he wins the nomination, Democrats are going to coalesce around him. So him being at only 62.6 right now is not really a worry. Marianne Williamson doesn't even appear on this graph. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has dropped out. He is now running as an independent. And we all know how well independents do in general elections in the U.S. So Biden is essentially safe from any challenges at this point in time. I believe there's one congressman from Minnesota, Wisconsin that's running against Biden, but really they're not even going to get polled at this point. Joe Biden will win the Democratic nomination as long as he does not die. Now, looking at the popularity of the two frontrunners, they are essentially the same. Biden's current approval rating stands at a net negative 13.8, with 53% disapproving and 40% approving, while for Donald Trump, his favorability is at a very similar negative 13.9, 54 to 47. So essentially, we have two very, very unpopular, one a president, one a former president, running against each other for the presidency and a second term for both of them. So this is going to be one of the most interesting elections that we see in quite a while. We also have head-to-head polling between Joe Biden and the three major Republican candidates. The first one is going to be, of course, Donald Trump. Donald Trump leads by 0.7% over Joe Biden, but it has really been very back and forth. They're essentially tied, but I do expect Joe Biden to take a much larger lead after Trump wins the primary and after the election is really more underway. These are very early polls, and of course Joe Biden, even if he loses the presidency, he is almost guaranteed to win the popular vote at this time, while Ron DeSantis is actually doing the worst now. For a while, one of DeSantis' main arguments for why he should be the nominee is that he polled stronger against Joe Biden than Donald Trump. But after DeSantis has run a pretty poor campaign over the last few months, people are really starting to sour on him, especially independents and former MAGA voters. And as of right now, Joe Biden leads against Ron DeSantis by 1.1%. But surprisingly, the candidate that polls the best against Joe Biden is neither of the two men, but instead Nikki Haley, who has a 1.6% lead over the president. Nikki Haley right now is currently surging in the polls, and this is one of the main reasons why she simply is performing better against the president than both Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. And so when looking at the presidential map, we are going to see a very, very similar map. We're going to need a Republican that's going to be able to win Florida like Ron DeSantis did, and Donald Trump will likely be be able to do that. But when looking at many of these other states, I do not think that the specific candidate is going to have too much of an impact, although Trump is likely to do better in the Rust Belt, but a lot worse in the Sun Belt. DeSantis or Nikki Haley, I think, would be two better candidates if they want to hold on to North Carolina, as well as take back both Georgia and Arizona. And now, before we go over to the Senate, we're going to look at the betting markets for both of the presidential nominations as well as the election overall. This is on Predicted. As of right now, Donald Trump has a 70% chance at winning the nomination. This is where people are putting their money. Nikki Haley now has a higher chance than Ron DeSantis, because in a primary like this, momentum is arguably the most important factor. Even if you're not polling directly in second place, if you're rising the way that Nikki Haley has over the last few weeks, it is not a surprise that Nikki Haley is now doing better than Ron DeSantis in the betting markets. And this really is a big shift, considering that just a few months ago, Ron DeSantis had a 40% chance at winning the nomination. Ron DeSantis, according to People's Money, was at one point in time the favorite to win the nomination. You can't see it on this graph, but you go back just 5-6 months, and Ron DeSantis would be at the very top of the list, even above Trump in many instances. Now, on the Democratic side, Joe Biden has the same chance, 70%, as compared to Donald Trump. And for Biden, really the only way he's not going to win is if he dies or he has some major health issue. And people are not betting on Kamala Harris winning the Democratic nomination. I would totally agree with this. I do not think Harris is liked enough to be able to win a major race like that. She was able to become vice president only under Joe Biden. She has had successes in California, but nationally, Kamala Harris is even less popular than Joe Biden, and she is not at all a viable candidate for the presidency. While Gavin Newsom is a little bit better, governor of a major state, very well known nationally and relatively popular among the Democratic Party, so he is currently seen as the Biden alternative. And then when looking at the market overall for who will win, Biden is at the very top there. Trump has a 37% chance, while Gavin Newsom has double the chance of winning compared to Ron DeSantis. Now, of course, this is all hypothetical. If they don't win the nomination, they essentially have no chance at winning the election, and the graph doesn't really tell us too much here. On Real Clear Politics, we have, I think, a more interesting graph with Trump actually ahead with a 34% chance, Biden at 31%. And again, Gavin Newsom has double the chance at winning the nomination than Ron DeSantis. Even Robert Kennedy has a better chance at winning at this point, as well as Michelle Obama, when compared to Ron DeSantis. And that really just goes to show you how significant of a tumble he's taken over the last few months. And now to finish off this video, we're going to look at the latest Senate polling that does suggest that Democrats have a very strong chance at holding on to their slim majority. So currently, when looking at the 6 competitive races, only one of these states currently has a Republican senator, and that is, of course, Ted Cruz in Texas. Now, in these remaining 5 states, we have Democratic incumbents who are all running for re-election. Jackie Rosen, as well as Kyrsten Sinema, who's not going to win re-election. She is running as an independent, but there will be a Democrat to replace her. Ruben Gallego is pretty far ahead in the polling right now. We have Matt Rosendale in Montana, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, and then finally, of course, John Manchin in West Virginia. So when I start off with Texas, I mean, Ted Cruz is going to win, but it's going to be a relatively close election like the one that we saw in 2018, when Beto O'Rourke came within 3 points of unseating the 2-time incumbent. Meanwhile, in Nevada, we have Jackie Rosen ahead of Adam Laxalt. We're ahead of her possible Republican opponents overall. There have been other polls that haven't been added to this page, but Jackie Rosen is relatively popular. And as we saw with the victory of Catherine Cortez Masto last year, I don't think Jackie Rosen should be too afraid that she's going to lose re-election, but it will nonetheless be one of the more competitive races of the 2024 cycle. And then moving on to Arizona, Ruben Gallego is the Democrat. Now, Kyrsten Sinema is barely polling above 10%. Her state has essentially left her behind, and since she's taking voters from both the left and the right, as Sinema is one of the most conservative, well, she was one of the most conservative Democrats in the Senate, she is going to hurt Democrats and Republicans essentially a similar amount, to the point where Ruben Gallego has a very clear path to victory. Recently, Carrie Lake has jumped into the race, but considering her surprising loss to Katie Hobbs for the governorship in 2022. I mean, honestly, she underperformed significantly. I don't think she is the best candidate for Republicans in Arizona, but she is also very likely to win the nomination, which is why I do have Arizona as lean Democratic as well, even though Kyrsten Sinema is no longer in the Democratic Party. And so these 3 states really are the most important ones. The remaining 97 seats, you can know with almost 100% certainty who's going to win. These seats are not going to flip. However, Montana, Ohio, West Virginia, these are the ones that are going to matter the most. Starting off with Ohio, Democrats have the best chance in this state. Sherrod Brown is a pretty popular incumbent. He is now running for his 3rd term, or maybe his 4th term now. He was first elected all the way back in 2006, and so Sherrod Brown is likely to face Frank LaRose. Currently, LaRose is the front runner in the primary, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens in a few months. But Sherrod Brown is likely to win his re-election despite it being a very, very close election. It's not even going to be a tilt state. Honestly, Ohio is going to be pretty safe for Democrats as long as Sherrod Brown is able to run campaigns like he has in the past, especially in 2018 when he won pretty comfortably. Moving on to West Virginia, this is probably the one that Democrats are likely to lose. Joe Manchin was pretty popular in West Virginia. He was even able to win the state of West Virginia in 2018, despite Trump winning West Virginia by a margin of 42% just 2 years prior. In 2012, when Joe Manchin was first reelected, he was able to win in an environment where Romney won by 27 points. That's very different from 43. It did not affect him too much in 2018. He was still able to win, although the race was definitely much closer in 2018 than it was in 2012 for Joe Manchin. 2024 is going to be a different story. If Manchin does run against Mooney, Manchin is likely to win. However, the problem is that Jim Justice, the very popular and really not that pro-Trump governor of West Virginia, Jim Justice, he is the one that's going to be running against Joe Manchin. He used to be a Democrat. He was elected governor as a Democrat, I believe, in 2016, but then he switched parties. And so at this point in time, if Jim Justice ends up being the Republican nominee in West Virginia, things really are not looking up for Joe Manchin. And so currently I have it as a likely Republican state. And finally, the tipping point is going to be Montana. Montana is going to decide who is going to win the Senate. If Democrats can hold on to the vice presidency with Joe Biden winning re-election, only 50 seats will be enough. And so John Tester is running for re-election with Matt Rosendale as the Republican frontrunner right now. And honestly, this one really is a true toss-up, but considering just how unfavorable this map is, I think it's pretty surprising that Democrats are even able to be in the conversation for who is going to end up controlling the upper chamber of Congress after 2024. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below. Do you agree that Democrats have a chance at winning the Senate next year? Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and also let me know, do you think Joe Biden will be able to win re-election against whoever you think the Republican nominee is going to be next year? Do you think Trump will be able to win re-nomination? The election is now just a year away, so make sure you stay tuned for regular updates on the 2024 general election.